I wish it was just as easy as jumping on realestate.com or domain and finding the perfect property, using the photos online, clicking buy and getting it at the perfect price or below market value in the perfect time. But the reality is it takes a lot of time to find the right property, and one of the things that a lot of first and second or third time investors don't consider is just how important the street that they're buying on is, which is why in today's video Simon and I are going to talk about 5 ideas or 5 things that are important when you're in a street. We're down here in North Brizzy today having a little bit of a look around at some properties for our clients, and while we're here we thought we'd shoot some vids with you and actually educate you as we go through. So what's the first thing you look at, Simon?
The first thing when we get to a property is considering the percentage of owner-occupiers in that suburb compared to the rental properties. Now, one thing that we're doing here is generalizing, which isn't an ideal situation, but you've got to be brutal. This is a business. You're investing a lot of money. You need to make these calls. So when we're walking through a street, you'll have a look at some properties, and we've got this one behind us. It's got really beautiful gardens. You can tell that they look after this property really well, which to me looks as though it is an owner-occupied property.
Without a doubt. Like, I've been getting into gardening lately, which is super geeky, but I can tell by the way that this garden looks that someone really cares about this place. And you know, I've been a tenant before. I lived in about 6 or 7 places before I bought my own. I certainly didn't look after things like that.
So that's why it's really important to actually inspect the properties that you're considering, drive through the suburbs that you're looking in, have a look at all the properties that are surrounding it, and not just have a guess from the realestate.com advertisement, because those things can be pretty skewed sometimes.
Yeah, without a doubt. And just because there's not a beautiful garden out there because some geek's not like ripping into it like I am at the moment, doesn't mean that this property behind us, for example, which you can't really see it properly now, but I'll show you as we walk past it. You know, here's another version of an owner-occupied property. You know, the gardens are okay, the lawn's nicely maintained, and I can see that the house, you know, is looking in really, really well-maintained position. And as we come a little bit further down the street, now in terms of the mix here, I really want a street that's at least 70 to 80% owner-occupied personally, if I'm thinking of buying there. So, you know, the top end of this street is a lot of owner-occupiers, but as we get down to this bottom bit, you know, there's a couple of homes here that look a little bit different.
So one of the things that we look out for is, have the lawns been maintained? What do the fences look like? You know, the way that that property appeals from the street. So as you can see, a couple of properties here, I don't mean to generalize, but they haven't been looked after as well as somebody may do so if it is an owner-occupier. So by looking down this street, I would 100% consider this to be a street that's got at least 70% of owner-occupiers, maybe even closer to 75 or 80%.
Now, it's not a deal breaker having rental properties next door to you. Obviously, 30%, 35% of the Australian property market rents, but it is just something to take into consideration when you're factoring in your due diligence. So what's the second thing we wanted to discuss?
The second thing is having a look at the properties and getting a bit of an understanding of how many of those have been renovated, how many have been knocked down and rebuilt, or how many are original. So this can help you get a better understanding of the owner-occupiers. It can also set you up to see what sort of trend that street's going to. So a lot of owner-occupiers are going to come in and do massive renovations to the properties to make it their own. They may even knock it down and rebuild it. And when people do that, what you're going to see is value increase in that street.
Yeah, so maybe that's not going to happen today in this street. You know, we are in Brisbane here, we're not in Sydney. So 15 years ago, a lot of properties in quality areas of Sydney, you know, this is a suburb within 20 k's of Brisbane, looked a lot like this. But as the value of properties have increased, as people's incomes have increased, as the population size has grown down there, as Simon said, more and more of these homes have been renovated. And then once people start detonating them or knocking them down to rebuild, you know, that's really when a suburb starts to take off. So I don't think we're going to see that in this area for the next 10 to 15 years, but I can guarantee if we were walking down this same street then, it'll look very, very different than it does now.
And what you find is, if we were closer to the CBD, if we were within that 5 kilometre radius, you'd see lots of properties that have been renovated or knocked down and rebuilt, but it takes time for that flow-on effect to happen. So, you know, you'll get the 5 kilometers doing it, then you might get 10 kilometers, 15, and it'll keep pushing. Similar to the beaches, if you're in walking distance to the water, you're going to see beautiful homes that have been knocked down and rebuilt or completely renovated, and that will start flowing out from the beaches as well.
Now, I don't know what it is about posties, but every single dog in the streets just started barking its absolute head off while these cars come past. Must just be like this intrinsic hate towards posties for some reason. Like, get out of here, get off my block. So what's the third thing that we wanted to touch on?
The third thing that we wanted to talk about is the average land size. So let's continue walking down the hill here. Ways that you can get a better understanding and see how big the land is by walking out the frontage and seeing how big the frontage of the property is.
And then taking a bit of a peek down the back of someone's yard and seeing how deep it is. And then loosely from there, you can start to get a bit of an idea. I mean, with things like Google Satellite and stuff these days as well, or Google Maps, you can easily jump on there as well and check out that stuff before you get to the street. But the bigger the land, effectively, the better. And what I've noticed from Sydney and Melbourne is that the quality suburbs close to the city that have the biggest piece of land are the ones long term that appreciate in value at a faster rate. And that's generally because mums and dads, owner-occupiers, want to live around those areas because the school districts, the parks, the access to transport, you know, the access to quality shopping areas is generally higher there as well.
Yeah, so that's what the fourth thing we're going to talk about is the positioning in the suburb. So what we mean by that is what is around you. How close is it to the local bus stop? How close is it to the local shops? How long is it going to take you to get to the train station? How long is it going to take you to get to a major highway? All of these different things are really important. The closer that you can be to those amenities, but still in a really nice quiet pocket of the suburb and really quiet streets, the better that your long-term performance could be.
And one little hack that we use, there's something called a walk score. And effectively, the higher the walk score, the better. Whether it's Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, Canberra, effectively the walk score is a number out of 100. The higher the better, and that just means how livable is the area for a tenant, or how livable is it for a mum and dad or a family living in that area long term. So that can be a nice little hack. You can just Google the walk score for free online for the suburbs you're considering buying, and you know, then walk around the suburb and get a bit of an idea driving around it before you buy, to just sanity check that that walk score is accurate.
Now, the fifth and last thing that we wanted to talk about is the positioning in the market. So this is looking a little bit broader, and once you've identified the right market, what we like to focus on is being within a close proximity to the CBD or within a close proximity to the water. So basically putting a 20 kilometre radius around a CBD or being within 1 to 2 kilometres of a beach is really desirable, especially on the eastern seaboard. We've found in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane.
Now, there's some logic and some history that supports this. According to Michael Matusik in the Australian Bureau of Statistics, around 75% of Australia's job, income and population growth is going to occur on the eastern seaboard in Sydney, southeast Queensland and Melbourne at 25% each apiece over the next 10 to 20 years. On top of that, we know that Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane have outperformed every other market in Australia long term. And then when we overlay some things like these little rules, you know, it's good to be in a good street, it's good to be in a great suburb, it's good to be in the right area, but it's also important to remember that suburbs within 20 k's of the city, according to Michael Matusik's research, outperform properties that are further away from that over the long term. So again, what we're trying to do here is just provide you with tiny little tips and tools that you can add into your tool belt so that the next property that you buy on your own, you know, actually sets you up for success and you don't miss those things that I missed out because I didn't know this stuff when I was getting started. So if you are looking for some help, Simon and I are business partners and we run Pumped On Property. We primarily buy in the southeast Queensland market at the moment. We'd love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session. So all you need to do to book your own free strategy session is jump over to www.pumpedonproperty.com and we can talk about where you are right now. We can talk about your plans for the next 12 months or the next 5 years, and we can educate you on what's going on in the Australian property market right now. And you can take that with a grain of salt, or we can talk about how we might be able to help you get into the market and make sure you follow these rules. So I wish you all the best. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Please check out our podcast, The Pumped On Property Show, and we wish you all the best. You know, take notes on these videos because there's little snippets of gold that can really help you make a much better decision moving forward.